He is going to be speaking and also kind of conversating with all of us as well throughout his presentation. And if you don't know John, he is a legend in the field. He has been working in wilderness therapy for 22 years and has worked with people like the Aspen Achievement Academy, Evoke therapy programs, and he now runs Red Cedar Transitions in Western North Carolina. So we're super excited for him to be here and glad he took the time to write down some awesome talking points from his brain, because it's a cool place in there and we're excited to hear what he has to say. So that is John. I'll pass it over to you.
I'll unmute myself. Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for showing up. As what I think I'd like to do is I would like to have this be, like Bex talked about briefly, I'd like to have this be, if possible, as much of a conversation as is me lecturing. I think we'll just get more out of it, and I would love that kind of level of engagement. So that being said, I think the format that I would love to strive for is, if you have questions that pop up at any time throughout the kind of my talking points, I was going to say presentation, but it's really much less formal than that. It's really just some talking points as I think about the X factor of nature. But if at any point in this you have questions, feel free to just unmute yourselves and say, hey, what about this? Or I've got a thought on this or that. And if I don't get to all of my talking points, it's a worthy sacrifice. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go along. You know, if anything comes up, any question is evoked, it's fair game. That said, I will jump into this, I think, wonderful topic that I have some experience and passion for, this idea of, I think the formal title was Substance Use Disorders and the X Factor of Nature. I have a couple of little caveats before I jump in. One is, just for the sake of convenience, during this presentation, you'll hear me use substance use disorder and substance abuser and addict pretty interchangeably. But just know, in my private practice, I don't necessarily do that. And I have reasons why. With some people, I'll use the word addict, and some people I'll say substance use disorder or substance abuse. And I think that's perhaps the topic for maybe another conversation beyond the scope of this. But just so you know, in my practice, I'm a little bit more mindful, and I don't use those as interchangeably as I'm going to during this presentation or talk. The other caveat is, I am going, instead of nature, I'm going to approach it from the word of wilderness. And for me, with wilderness experience, there's this connotation of depth. Whereas, nature can be like, I grab my soy latte from Starbucks and go see the flowers at the Arboretum for an hour, which is great. Like, that's a nature experience, but it's a little bit different than what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about kind of a depth-oriented wilderness experience. So with those two caveats, I'm going to jump in. And I know it's supposed to be about kind of the X factors, those things that maybe are hard to put words to, maybe a little bit more mysterious, not quite as obvious. And I'm going to get to those, but I'm such a believer in the mind-body connection and body wellness, huge implication in mind wellness and emotional wellness and vice versa. So I do have to say, while I'm going to focus on things that are less obvious, the more obvious things like just sleep and exercise, and typically clients eating better than they have in a long time, healthy sun exposure. I'm going to say exercise again because it's so important. Like, all of those things, they are just as, if not more important than these kind of more mysterious X factors that I'm going to dive into. So with that as a prelude, let me jump into the 4 X factors that I, as I was kind of thinking about this, came up with. I'm going to just read through the 4 of them quickly and then go back and revisit each one a little bit more in depth. So the first X factor is helping clients, helping people move from an external locus of control to an internal locus of control. And there's a quote by Viktor Frankl that I love, and he said, and I think it's from Man's Search for Meaning: "If I can't control my circumstances, the only thing left to focus on is myself." And I think by the time clients, patients, whatever we want to call them, get to us, students, the external locus of control is the locus of control is very external. You know, it's very much expend a lot of kind of a preponderance of their emotional and mental energy, you know, blaming the court system or mom and dad or spouses or bosses. And a lot of their mental and emotional energy is spent on things, you know, kind of focused out in the world, many of which they can't control or can control only, you know, very peripherally. So, you know, wilderness does a very good job of helping us move back into a place of, okay, what's in my control here? And how can I take action to better my life in the here and now in a way that is effective? And part of what comes out of that experience is this idea of, oh, maybe I do have more control over my well-being than I thought I did. You know, at some point in a good wilderness experience, for me, that's kind of a hoped for realization or hoped for light bulb to pop on. This idea of, oh, you know, maybe there's more to it. Maybe I have control over my well-being, instead of, you know, the court system has to get it just right, and then mom and dad have to get it just right. And, you know, in other words, like the world has to kind of conspire to align just in the right way, then I'll make good decisions. You know, then I'll be in a good place to make good decisions, healthy decisions. You know, it's very much a kind of a victim stance. And if we think of the drama triangle, we've got the victim and the villain and then the rescuer. So many of my clients in wilderness and now, you know, what I'm doing now with my Red Cedar Transitions program, kind of, there's a reversion back into this victim stance. And as we know, it's a pretty powerless place to operate from. And having said that, you know, I'm very aware that with many of our clients, they have been victimized in their lives. Like it's you know, it's real. So there's no denial of, no, you're you know, you're never a victim. You haven't been victimized. There aren't, you know, social inequalities that you face. Like I'm not denying that. And by the time, you know, clients are getting to us, or I'll speak for me, it's just obvious that if they're going to remain and continue to put themselves into this kind of victim stance, it's just a powerless place to operate from. The way that I talk about it is, you know, sounds like you're giving your power away. You know, in other words, the world has to be right, and then I'll be able to live an effective life. It's pretty powerless. And as we know, so much distress comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. So, you know, in wilderness, we can sit around and be mad and be pissed off about the weather, or, you know, mosquitoes, or it's too hot or too cold, and just kind of wait around for, you know, Mama Nature or Father Nature, or, you know, nature to cooperate with our wants and desires, and experience the natural consequences of waiting around. Or we can recognize that there are things that we can do to make our lives better in the here and now, and we can take action based on those things. So again, fostering the sense of, how can I move in the here and now in a way that is effective in my life versus, the world just has to kind of cooperate for me in order to move forward, to lead a healthy life, make good decisions. And this can foster a sense of agency and self-efficacy that has been long lost to so many of our clients. Like, they haven't had that experience in a long time. It's very much been, they feel like they're kind of a victim of the world, a victim of circumstance. And again, sometimes they are. And for me, it becomes a matter of, okay, we can recognize that, hopefully work through that. And how can we move back to a place of agency in my world? So that's the first one. Second one is experiential learning. An old boss of mine and a colleague, Dr. Brad Reedy from Evoke therapy programs, he had this quote, and I love it. And it's, we're wounded by experience and we're healed by experience. So talking about the power of experience, and think about, I know we have, I think, quite a few therapists on this call. Think about, like, and the people have gone to therapy. I'm both. Think about our most powerful therapy experiences, and their experiences. They're typically not an exchange of information. It's not like you give them just the right information and then they fit it in the equation and it's, it all makes sense. Like, there's an element of psychoed. I'm not anti-psychoed, but just think of our most powerful experiences. And really, it's not an exchange of information. It's a risk, excuse me. It's a risk to show up naked, metaphorically, and be seen and be received. That's the experience. To me, in my experience, those are the most powerful therapy experiences. And then you think about wilderness, and wilderness is all about experience. It's all about kind of the immediacy of being in the here and now and having our vulnerabilities exposed. And I'm going to come back to that vulnerabilities word, because that's one of the four. Also, the power of experience. Think of a toddler learning to walk. I'm not a parent, but I don't know, 8, 9 months old, maybe they start learning to walk, and they don't learn to walk from mom and dad saying, okay, now slightly shift your weight to the left foot and, like, pull up your right leg and bend your knee 2 inches and lift your right foot 2 inches and then slowly shift back and they don't learn that way, right? They learn from getting up and falling and getting up and falling and getting up and falling experience. And experiential learning, that process from an evolutionary perspective, that's 500 million years old. This kind of didactic learning, that, using this symbolic language, that came with the prefrontal cortex. That's about 2 million years old. So that's the new kid on the block. And so many of our clients have this relationship where they're so kind of wrapped up in, the phrase that I use is the dictator within, in, their schemas, their self-talk. There are probably 4 or 5 other words we could use to describe that. But they're so wrapped up in their internal process that they've kind of removed themselves from the experience of learning and the power of learning by experience. And as we learn from experience in the natural world, one of the other things that can happen, and this is really beautiful to see, is the wonder of nature can start to open up again. Again, you think of a kid and they can just kind of frolic around a field for hours and pick up a flower and be fascinated. Like, they've got that innate just curiosity that tends to, for a variety of reasons, but especially with addiction, that gets killed, that gets deadened, that sense of kind of awe and wonder. And And I think, even some kind of reawakening of that connects us to the here and now, connects us to the availability of experiential learning. So that's tied up in this whole experiential learning piece as well, this opening of awe and wonder again that has been dormant for often many years with our clients. So tied into this kind of experiential learning gives us immediate feedback for our actions. We make a good shelter, we stay dry that night. We're able to construct a bow drill fire, we eat hot instead of eating cold. Like there's that we get that immediate feedback from the environment, which is also part of this experiential learning, this 500 million year old learning. And then the other piece with experiential learning is the consequences aren't contrived. They're natural consequences. In other words, like, it's not just raining on me, it's raining on Johnny over there and the instructors. And so from that position of consequences that are natural instead of contrived, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's much harder for someone to put themselves back into that victim role of, I'm just a victim of nature and nature's being mean to me, versus a contrived consequence might be, mom and dad taking away, I don't know, the car or something, or someone's relapsed and now you have to go back to a certain treatment center or a certain level, jump through these hoops, and then you can return. There's nothing wrong with contrived consequences. Like, we need them. I'm not bashing them, but I think there's something just stronger about natural consequences. Sometimes with my clients, I'll be talking to parents and maybe a young person has been through 2, 3, 4 treatments and placements and relapsed or not been successful, and they continue to be resistant to even being in treatment. And I'll say something like, you know what, maybe Johnny needs to scrape his knees on life a little bit. And what I mean is, maybe they need to experience like, okay, seems like you're not ready for treatment. You don't want to be in treatment. We're not going to force you anymore. But at the same time, we're not just going to pay for your reality. You're on your own. And, part of what can be recognized there as they scrape their knees on life is, there can be a humbling or a softening, some kind of light bulb, such as like, oh, maybe I don't know better. Maybe there are things people can teach me. Maybe, there can be a softening and opening up to help and support. So that's experiential learning. Next one is wilderness can change our relationship to struggle. Again, so often addicts, substance abusers, substance use disorder people arrive to us very kind of struggle averse, just kind of wanting to wrap themselves in this cocoon where they're protecting themselves from the world. As a result, their world is shrinking in scope and power, and they're just trying to stay out of anything that would resemble discomfort. They're chasing the buzz that's just going to make them feel better. They're stepping away from experience that is potentially challenging. And I think part of our job as treatment providers, both in wilderness and otherwise, is, at least the way that I see it, is helping our clients get better at feeling bad. Like helping them recognize that feeling good isn't, it's most of the time not worth chasing. And the moment we start chasing, we lose it. It's like Alan Watts had this law, he called it the backwards law. It's like the moment we start to chase a good feeling, we've lost it. And that in itself is unpleasant. And the moment, conversely, we kind of let go and stop chasing, that is pleasant. So there's this kind of, paradoxical relationship with trying to feel good. I talk about how grit and resilience are, I would say, inversely, no, it wouldn't be an inverse relationship. It would be directly proportional to the struggle endured. Like, in other words, like I say something like, I wouldn't say it's completely impossible, but I think it's pretty damn close to impossible to actually have real growth and not have some struggle. They're two sides of the same coin. So, the moment that we can start opening up to struggle and hardship, the moment we're opening ourselves up to real potential change, real potential growth, healing. And, this gets into the territory of, very well established and talked about kind of theory and self-help and change and psychology and counseling. And this idea of the growth mindset, the growth versus the fixed mindset, Carol Dweck's research at Stanford. And I haven't dove into the literature with this too much, but I would bet that it's been done. And I'll bet there's a pretty direct correlation between fixed mindset and substance use disorder or addiction. In other words, like, the more fixed one is with their mindset, the more prone they are to a substance use disorder. And, part of what happens there is, like, with the fixed mindset, there can be such an aversion to struggle. Struggle becomes equated with, if I struggle, that means I'm less than. It means I'm inadequate. It means it becomes some kind of character deficit from the fixed mindset perspective. And with the growth mindset, conversely, struggle is looked at as, okay, this may be difficult, it may suck, but what can I learn from it? How can I get curious about it? Rather than there's just kind of risk averse, struggle averse, like, no, I step away from any of that discomfort of the fixed mindset. And as we all know, wilderness is a place where struggle is inherent. You spend any more time in the wilderness than the 1 hour, let's look at the flowers walk, and you're going to come up with some kind of struggle. And it's just part of the experience. So it's unavoidable. So clients have to kind of face that experience of, oh, I'm struggling right now. This is difficult. And the more I kind of retreat from it, and again, based on experience, instead of like an instructor or therapist or anyone telling them, but they're having this experience of, oh, the more I try to kind of cocoon myself and retreat from it, the more miserable I'm getting and the more ineffective in my world I'm becoming. So it really calls them into this place of, I need to step toward this challenge. And then conversely, clients get to experience the other side of that coin, the other side of that struggle coin, which is the satisfaction that can come after making it through struggle. Like, an example might be, having to get to a certain destination. Maybe there's water there or food there that you didn't have, and like having to do a tough hike to get there, and you get there, it's the end of the day, you make the best damn beans and rice that you've ever had, and you get to experience the satisfaction of, wow, I made it through, and maybe there's a sunset there, like and again, that experience, by the time with many of our clients, has long been lost. It's been a long time since they've actually had the satisfaction that comes from going through a struggle and making it out the other end, because there's just, what's developed is that kind of fixed mindset, struggle averse relationship to hardship, where it's just kind of this reflexive, no, don't want to struggle. So wilderness does a really good job with that. Last one is, the last X factor is vulnerability. And I mentioned this a bit earlier. I'm a bit of a word nerd. So I looked up the the Latin root of the word vulnerable, and it comes from vulnus, which means to wound. So vulnerable means woundable. Can I allow myself to be wounded? And there's a poem by one of my favorite current poets. His name is David White. Some of you may have heard him, but I want to read it because I think it gets to some of these pieces of vulnerability in a way that I'm not going to get to. Vulnerability is not a weakness, a passing indisposition, or something we can arrange to do without. Vulnerability is not a choice. Vulnerability is the underlying, ever-present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. To run from vulnerability is to run from the essence of our nature. The attempt to be invulnerable is the vain attempt to become something we are not, and most especially to close off our understanding of the grief of others. More seriously, in refusing our vulnerability, we refuse to help we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential tidal, T-I-D-A-L, and conversational foundations of our identity. To have a temporary, isolated sense of power over all events and circumstances is a lovely, illusionary privilege, and perhaps the prime and most beautifully constructed conceit of being human, and especially of being youthfully human. But it is a privilege that must be surrendered with that same youth, with ill health, with accident, with the loss of loved ones who do not share our untouchable powers eventually and most emphatically given up as we approach our last breath. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. Our choice is to inhabit vulnerability as generous citizens of loss, robustly and fully, or conversely, as misers and complainers, reluctant and fearful, always at the gates of his existence, but never bravely and completely attempting to enter, never wanting to risk ourselves, never walking fully through the door. I think that's beautiful. It's hard to follow that with words that are too meaningful, but I have a couple other thoughts. It's very hard to hide in the woods, metaphorically. It doesn't take long for old defenses, for kind of compensatory mechanisms to begin to unravel in the woods. We get seen for the creatures that we are. We get exposed for the vulnerable creatures that we are. And addicts, substance abusers, especially, get very good at hiding their vulnerability from themselves, and then also hiding it from the world. They go to great lengths to conceal their vulnerability from both themselves and the world. And wilderness does an amazing job of cutting through that. And that vulnerability, from among other places, comes from the discomfort of sometimes being cold, sometimes being hungry, of not being in control, of being scared. We in wilderness, we can get cracked open. I've got this kind of image in my head of like a nut, and it's when that hard shell cracks open that something can grow. And wilderness does, a fantastic job of and of doing that, of kind of exposing in a very healthy way, exposing us in a way that at least invites us into a place of growth and healing. And I will say, with all four of those X factors, they can be found in other realms. I wouldn't argue that they can't. I would say, though, I would assert that at least I don't know of any other context where all four of those, where there's such a powerful confluence of all four of those. There might be a context where that really heavily, where you get one or the other, or two or two out of the four, but I just don't know of any context where all four of those just commingle in such a potent way. So I think I left us about 25 minutes for conversation. Happy to hear thoughts, hear questions.
I love those factors. I think I've seen them in the woods all the time. I enjoyed how you explained that. I think when I was thinking of just the X factor of woods, there's always a story that pops in my head of this 10-year-old that I worked with when I worked at Seuss, who was kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He would just freak out randomly and just lose his mind. And we had been kind of in and out of holds with him all day, and he was like really trying to hurt himself and was just like screaming out to nature, just, what is the point? I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. And we were under this huge maple tree, and right when he like screamed, I don't get it, what's the point, for like the 10th time, one of the leaves fell and landed like right on his heart. And he just like picked it up and then stared at us and was like, is this the point? And we were like, it was such a magical moment for everyone involved. And it's such a, metaphorically speaking, everything you're talking about is so true, but it was in that moment I felt like it was like a physical representation of that. He like couldn't have been struggling or more vulnerable in that moment.
Yeah.
Just to have that experience like physically kind of validated by this maple tree for him.
Right.
And it was so cool how that happened. I was thinking about that several times while you were talking, and just wanted to kind of add that to the conversation.
Yeah, that's a really cool experience. It reminds me, as I was going through these potential X factors, one of them that didn't make the final four, but it was way up there, was just the power of metaphor. Mm-hmm. And, you had probably been in dialogue with this person, quite a bit, and trying to talk to them, and yet all it took was like something like that, and that, that opened them up. And, I think of like, if someone puts up a crappy shelter and they get wet that night, like it doesn't require like this kind of, it doesn't require a ton of verbal processing often. Like, you don't have to like kind of keep going through the front door, so to speak. Like, metaphor, I love nature because it's so full of like lessons in the moment and metaphor. And that does so much of the teaching. And again, I think that teaching is so much more powerful because, it kind of diffuses the whole victim villain, perspective. And it just slides in a way where, where the defensives aren't, it's so powerful. So I'm reminded of like, I was in southern Utah, central Utah. It was winter, it was summer, and we were up on the Awapa Plateau, which is it's like a 9,000 foot plateau, and there's some lakes and rocks and aspen trees, and sitting talking with another instructor with a client, and off in the rocks we could see a weasel pop out of the rocks, and then we didn't see the sparrows before, but all of a sudden these two sparrows pop up, and they're clearly like trying to like get the weasel's attention. And then, you know, we spotted like there's a ground nest, and they were trying to keep their young safe by sacrificing themselves, potentially sacrificing themselves. And that led into like a conversation around this client's family that they hadn't, you know, they hadn't approached until then. And it was because of like what we had seen in nature. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of like the power of metaphor and like accessing difficult parts of clients through kind of, you know, side doors, and metaphor just does that so well.
Can I ask a question about that story you just related?
Yeah.
Was that meaning making facilitated by you and the other instructor, or was it by the client themselves seeing it and drawing connections?
Both. And I don't, like, I think initially an instructor brought it up, like,
okay,
you know, in a fairly skillful way, like, and the cool thing like is like we were watching the drama unfold together, and it captured all of our interests. So, you know, like it brought them a kind of out of their own internal misery, and it got them engaged in the natural world. And so like even that process, just because it was so cool to watch, like they were much more open to being able to talk about it, you know, had it not been what it was, had it just been us continuing to you know, try to talk to them.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'm curious because what I was thinking about during in particular the mentioning of humility, which I really appreciated. And I was paying attention, but I spiraled a little bit in my own brain around it's because you can't manipulate nature. You can work with nature and achieve the goals and meet the intentions that you've set, or adjust to attempt to meet the intentions that you've set, but you can't manipulate nature. You know, like when we put people on the raft and we go down section 9, I get it. He's stealing your chips and he's leaving his laundry on the floor. But if you can't put that garbage aside, we're hitting that rock and we're all going for a swim.
Yeah.
Because the river doesn't care.
River doesn't care
what Mike does or doesn't do.
Yep.
So I guess I say all that to kind of pose that question of like what, not asking for a specific percentage, but like just the value of coaching through, or maybe it's as simple as holding space for a client, for another human being to set an intention. I think meaning making happens all the time. And if I'm in a funk, then these woods are dark, it's cold, the wind is, you know, that wind is bitter chill. And if I've been led through some semblance of a deeper need, or a behavior pattern that maybe it's worth considering leaving in the woods, suddenly I'm not seeing how dark the trees are. I'm seeing that, you know, that burst of light come through the leaves, and it's like, you know, I'm seeing that maple leaf fall on my heart.
Yeah.
While I'm questioning the meaning of all of it. Because if I'm not, and I'm not held in that therapeutic space, whatever that looks like, I might not even notice that the leaf, I mean, that back to the story you're telling, to me, speaks to whoever was involved on staff, among other things, for creating that trust and rapport and therapeutic container for that to happen. To me, I mean, nature's going to do what it's going to do, and I think there is an obligation or responsibility, maybe is a better word, to respect the metaphor and at least those 4 X factors that you brought up. It's going to occur. Doesn't matter, as you said. Like if you're in there for more than, I would say it's less than an hour, but sure, if you're in the woods for more than an hour, this stuff is there at all times. And if I'm then facilitating any type of work or introspection, even in that environment, maybe it is obligation to be able to hold and, I don't know, lean into and invite curiosity. Because I don't know, to get past what that 4-year-old who can play in the field for hours at a time looking at a leaf, my niece does that all the time, it drives me nuts. right? Like, I'm like, it's cold, let's go back in the house. And she's just doing the arm thing where they just swing the arms for 2 hours straight.
Right.
And there's, at some point that's gone, you know, what is it, biophilia, the
Yeah,
theory,
right.
right? So like at
Yeah.
some point, I don't know if it's part of the hypothesis, but that urge to affiliate with nature gets distracted, gets lost. And that, I think, is where what some of us on this call can step in and kind of jumpstart it, jumpstart it.
Jumpstart it. Yeah.
That makes more sense. So I don't know, it seems like what you're discussing and what you've witnessed for as long as you've witnessed it, I don't take any issue with it. I think that I'm curious of your theories on, or thoughts on, the intention that happens before that happens.
Yeah, like maybe like somehow setting the stage so someone can be open or ready for that, or like.
Yeah, not with any, not and free of agenda. But here's what we're going into, you know, wide angle vision. Like, don't just look with your eyes, like just some cues, or just some curious open-ended questions before anyone even takes a step into the woods and they're still like on the gravel of the parking lot. Like,
Yeah.
you need to put away the eyes that you use to use your phone and use your computer and fill out that job application, because those aren't going to work out here.
Yeah. Yeah. I you know, when I was an instructor, I felt like probably more than anything else, other than just keeping them physically safe, which is always primary, but more than anything else, I really felt like it was our obligation to model something, to model a way of being in the world. And so what that might look like is like modeling this childlike curiosity about the landscape that we're in. And like, you know, if you're going through the woods, the wilderness, and you're saying, oh, there's that tree, and you can use this for that, and you've got some energy with it, like that really, like that invites a lot. That invites a certain engagement. And sure, you may get clients who are still like, yeah, whatever, fuck this, I don't want to be here. But I'm a big fan of simply modeling, and like I don't think that's, you know, just enough. Like I think we have to do more than model. So, but beyond that, you know, as far as like kind of verbal priming of the pump, for me, it's so situational and so like client specific and group specific. So in other words, like I might do more kind of verbal priming, and then other times I really want the experience to speak for itself, and I might add nothing verbally other than just to be there with them and say, wow. So it's just, you know, for me, it's just very situational and, you know, case by case, day by day kind of thing. But I certainly see the need for what you're saying, like kind of priming people, asking them to maybe look for things, and you know, like I said, as you show your excitement, it might be contagious, and they might, you know, start to engage more. I don't know if that gets to what you were asking about or commenting on, but
yeah, oh totally. I was just curious if I mean, yes, it totally does, because I think it's you know, teachers I've had talk about, you know, it's a 50-50 classroom. Just let the woods do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Which is great, and it's true, and it's proven in my experience to be accurate. And if it's 50-50, there's still 50% that I got to do.
Exactly.
You know, it's not 80-20. And even if it was, it's still 20% that I got to show up with.
You got it. Yep.
I almost feel like that balance with 50-50 is so intuitive and comes with just doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was probably like year one, I was still just kind of focused on my own stuff, I feel like, as an instructor. And then year two, it was like, oh, I'm going to be more creative. And then by year three, it was like, you know, the same kid his mom had died. That was like he was just grieving. And he ripped a baby tree out of the ground when he was super upset. And then when he de-escalated, was devastated that he had destroyed this tree's life, because he was like connecting it to, dying young, and his mom. And he ended up like, he was trying to figure out how to replant it, and like the roots were messed up. I was like, buddy, this isn't going to happen. And he was just distraught. Like, what do I do? How do I make this up to the world? I've ruined this tree's life, And he ended up cutting into pieces and making a fire, and then putting the ashes where the tree was planted. And this was all his idea, but the metaphors he was making, I mean, it was so tangible that he was processing his mom's death, that it was like, I was doing what you're talking about, just being there, but at the same time, it was like, just suggestions, like, okay, you can't replant it. That's not going to work. What else can we do? Like,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to make a fire. Okay, cool. Ashes help stuff grow, actually. So like, what if we put this here? And, just like suggesting a way of healing, but not really, he was running the ship on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It did feel 50-50, and almost like 33 in that situation.
Yeah. I love that, because, it's not at all, you're there with him. You're, it's not at all this kind of hierarchical, I know better, you need to do this. Or, it's just like, you're just there to guide. And it's just so empowering for him in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious if anybody else has anything they want to add, or, curious why you're here, or anything you wanted to share. I'm excited to see all of you on here. So I just wanted to open that up, looking at the time, and see if you guys had anything you wanted to say.
I can share a little bit. Thanks for those 4 X factors, John, and for some of the discussion afterwards. It's been funny and also enlightening to hear. Something that Beck said that I was thinking a lot about and trying to like formulate something to say about it, but because it's like the words like intuition, and it's like how to foster that and pay attention to it, and like what that requires as the guide to like have all of these policies or rules or whatever like in your head, but then also like be able to let go enough to let like my intuition show me like what a teachable moment is. Because like those can be like really forceful, right? Like, hey, like what Matt was saying before, it's like, hey, I need you guys to think about this on this mountain bike ride we're gonna have, and if you don't think about it, then whatever. Instead of just like trying to like let things happen naturally, which was like a big sub point of point 2 of like experiential learning. And it's difficult, right, for me. And I don't know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about like what is intuition, and like what is something that I've spent a lot of time working on, and then also like what is like my own self-evaluation in that moment, which is more of like the external locus of control to internal locus of control. Like how can I like be constantly self-evaluating, and then how can I constantly be like present to like recognize a teachable moment, and then also like how can I, it's just like how can I diffuse like these power struggles, or how can I do all these things, and then all of a sudden it turns into a lot of like how can I just be like Michael in this moment. And I don't know, I've just been thinking a lot about intuition and all of this, and self-evaluation. Maybe it's because you started off with like the hope of internal locus of control, and that's like where my brain goes. But I was mostly here to hear what John's X factors were. And yeah, that's why I'm here. Thanks.
Cool. I love that. Thanks for sharing, dude.
Cool. I think I know maybe half of you all. If anyone else has an interest, I'd love to, meet you, whether it's over a cup of coffee or Zoom or socially distanced lunch, whatever makes sense. So my email address is john@redcedartransitions.com. So yeah, I'm always up for networking. So if you want to get in touch, please do.
It might not be a terrible idea if anyone else is comfortable with putting their contact information up in the chat. Trisha, I don't know what your
I'll do that.
direct stuff is, just to call you out in front of the group now that you're in private practice.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll put that in the chat. And then I'm here because I've worked in wilderness and just really want to stay connected to that kind of work and experiential work. And now I'm doing a lot more office-based private practice work. But even just as we were talking, there were ideas for how to start to incorporate more of this embodiment experiential aspects in regular old therapy, as well as like when I can manage to get folks to meet me outside. So it's somewhat aspirational to just stay connected to the wilderness community and that experiential learning. And I work with the LGBTQ community and substance abuse. So I'm working a lot with trans and non-binary folks, really more so than substance abuse at this point. And they're just got my brain moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate it.
Sure. Trish, are you currently taking clients?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to get your contact info.
Yeah, just put it in the chat.
Okay, great.
We've got a couple minutes left. I don't know if Alex or Heather wanted to introduce yourselves, or if you would rather just not. You do not have to, but I just wanted to leave the floor open for that. And if not, we can close it out.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I appreciate everything that was said tonight. I'm relatively new to working in the woods. And so just being able to pick up on the wisdom that everyone has here has been extremely helpful, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you came.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for all kicking off our conference series. We're going to have Sandy Nuez speak on the 18th about client-centered trauma-informed care. We're super stoked about that. And we'll get kind of registration for that up and going. We were missing a few folks tonight, so we might open the pool a little bit more just to see who, to widen who shows up. We'd like to keep it to like 10 because we want to have conversations like this and be able to put our contact info in the chat and get to know each other. That's the whole point of this. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you guys have a wonderful couple weeks, and maybe we'll see you on the 18th and maybe we won't, but it's been lovely to see you tonight.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank
John.
you, John. And
You're
thank you
welcome.
all for coming. It's good to see you all.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Have a
See you
great
soon.
night.
Thanks.